Welcome to a special, I don't know, mini episode of The Breakdown. This is going to be kind of fun. We don't normally do these sorts of things where it's just one issue, one thing, but we're here to talk about it. That's what we're doing tonight. I'm very excited for the conversation that we're going to have tonight because we're tangentially and kind of sort of directly involved in it. It's getting very meta over here at The Breakdown these days. What are you going to do? But before we get into the nuts and bolts of that, I'm very excited to welcome our guest to the program tonight, Petra Schulz. Look what I did there. I got the name right. I had to write it down
You
phonetically.
did well.
Petra Schulz, co-founder of the organization Moms Stop the Harm, while not speaking in a capacity for them today, to be clear. I've tried to get you on the show before. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you. Really excited to be here. Love your show, and love what you uncover, and really deep dive into issues in our province. And that's what we need to do. We need to hold people accountable, and that's what we want to talk about today: holding media accountable.
Absolutely. Before we get to that conversation, though, I want to just provide a little bit of context for our audience. Um, and let's start with who is Petra Schulz?
Well, I'm an Albertan. I moved here over 40 years ago. I'm a mom. I'm an advocate. Some people say I'm a radical activist. I'll wear that badge with pride. Um, I and my family, we lost our youngest, Danny, in 2014 to drug poisoning. He was one of the early victims of the drug poisoning crisis. He died from fentanyl, which he had bought. He was in recovery, bought one more pill, which he didn't know what it was and didn't stand a chance. So after Danny's death, I wanted to know why he died and what needed to change. And that's how I became involved in drug policy advocacy and a really firm advocate for harm reduction and for recovery, because they go together. And I'm one of the three co-founders, together with Lorna Thomas and Leslie McBain, of Mom Stop the Harm. And Mom Stop the Harm is a national organization that now is mostly focused on providing supports to families, grief support and supports for families who have loved ones who are using, and has in the past also been very actively engaged in advocacy. And many of us are still involved in advocacy. And my focus is right now on my home province of Alberta. There's lots to do here.
We do. I want to just walk it back for a quick sec because you emphasize something that I think is really, really, really important. And that has to do with it when it comes to addressing mental health and addiction issues. It is not a one size fits all approach. It is not a one solution fits all at that moment in time approach. And you talked about the importance of having both harm reduction and recovery. Can you talk about that for just a quick sec? Because I think that there's some nuance in there that needs to be, I want to make sure my audience understands.
Well, harm reduction is where we say we meet people where they're at. We don't shame or blame people for using. We accept the fact that they are using at that moment in time for whatever reason, could be trauma, could be mental health, could be other reasons. And we want to keep people alive and well. And we also want to build trust, build relationship, and hopefully open a door that a person can use at a future point and seek out wellness or recovery, however that might look like for them. For some people, that could be assisted with medication. It might mean counseling. For some people, it could be abstinence-based. But for me, it's not recovery or harm reduction. Dead people don't recover. And I learned that really the hard way. That the day before Danny died, he asked me to make an appointment with his psychologist and his doctor. And because he'd been in recovery, he was living in a nice little apartment in downtown Edmonton. He was working at one of the best restaurants in town. And I didn't say, "Hey, Danny, are you using again?" Because that would not have been a good conversation. I just said, "Sure, sweetie, I'll make those appointments." he was not very good at making his own appointments, and we had arrangements with his healthcare providers. So in the morning, phone the doctor, phone the psychologist, but and he was at work that morning. He worked the shift, went home, used one pill, and died. So um, availability of treatment was not the barrier. Wanting was not the barrier for him. It was that there was harm reduction in place. There wasn't naloxone yet, that we can give people to reverse an overdose. There wasn't really rapid access to treatment. Um, so for me, the two go together. They go hand in hand. It's not one or the other. And if anybody says we don't need harm reduction, we only need recovery, and they, well, the dead don't recover. You cannot repeat that often enough.
And yet there's some people who don't seem to fully grasp that concept.
Mm-hmm.
And this is
Mm-hmm.
where I pivot because we saw a little debate which turned into a what the holy hell is happening here moment between the former chief of staff to the premier of Alberta, Danielle Smith, her former chief of staff, Marshall Smith, no relation. He wrote an op-ed or opinion piece in the Calgary Herald where he endorsed the view of several municipal candidates and endorsed a pilot project to pursue more policing options to get people forcibly off the street if they're using drugs as long as they're not alcohol because that's still cool. He wrote his piece, and that's not the full piece. If you for anybody who wants to know all of the details of what I'm talking about, you can go to our Substack or the episode that we did on this because that's part of why we're having this conversation. But there's a friend of the show, and I'll own my bias on this. I think Guy's awesome. I'm talking
Yes.
about Guy Fellicella. He wrote a response to that opinion piece, um, and then a bunch of legal shenanigans occurred, and by all outward appearances, the Calgary Herald, under the threat of legal action by Marshall Smith, that does not appear to have a significant base in actual legal stuffs. The Calgary Herald deleted the article. So, how did that come to your attention? Let's start with that.
Well, I'm a follower of the show. So I do pay attention when you post on social media that there's a mini show coming up and coming down. I thought, oh, wonder what that is about. And then I got a text from Guy saying, watch the breakdown tonight. And I said, okay, now I'm really intrigued. So yeah, chatting with Guy, watching the show, I became aware. And I got really angry. I got upset. And for two reasons. One, I have huge respect for Guy. He bridges harm reduction and recovery. Without harm reduction, he wouldn't be alive. And without recovery, he wouldn't be having the beautiful family he has now. He wouldn't be able to go out and educate people on the issues and do all the wonderful work that he does. So I have huge respect for him. His lived experience is painfully earned, painfully earned. And I think people like Guy just deserve a lot of respect. And they don't deserve to be silenced by people in power like Marshall Smith or the National Post. So I was really mad about that. But then the bigger picture, we look at what's happening down south. And I mean, I wrote a letter and he's not and Jimmy Kimball, but it's the same kind of thing where opposing voices are being silenced. So this is not just about harm reduction or recovery. It's about press freedom, freedom of speech. It's democracy and American style politics by a media outlet that is foreign owned. So the other concern I have here is foreign ownership. So there are a number of issues that are just converging. And I was chatting with some friends and said, well, we should write a letter, not that a letter changes things big time, but it raises awareness.
Yeah, it for sure does. And I think that's the really important piece for me here with this conversation with what's happened
Mm,
with Guy, because I don't think that the whoever made the decision to pull the article, and there's going to be some people I've seen the arguments out there in the social media sphere particularly the more toxic corners where they've said, well, they wouldn't have pulled the article if it was defamatory. By all accounts that we were able to get, the article was run by the legal department for the Calgary Herald before it was published. It was determined to not be defamatory, so that argument simply doesn't hold water. If the article was defamatory, it wouldn't have been published in the first place. The bottom line is that there were people at the Calgary Herald who believed that what Guy wrote was an important part of the conversation. It provided context, it provided nuance, and it informed people. And for that to be deleted with no acknowledgement, no explanation, that to me is it's political influence creating censorship. And that is the opposite of having an informed conversation. I've been going back and forth with a conservative pundit, I guess, today, over a totally unrelated issue. And both of us have agreed, like, I think you're completely wrong. Um, I don't think that he should be silenced. He doesn't think that I should be silenced. We can go at each other with the veracity of rabid animals and still respect that those opinions have a right to exist in the ether and be interpreted by people. And this is the antithesis of that to me. Um, so talk about the letter.
Well, I mean, the letter is to the it's to the National Post and the Calgary Herald, to the editors, but also it is going to be sent to the Canadian Association of Journalists, and we'll be putting it in as a complaint with the National News Media Council. So that's kind of the idea behind it. So basically, the letter doesn't go into the argument Marshall and Guy have. That is a separate conversation. And of course, I agree with Guy that not letting people, not tolerating public substance use doesn't mean that substance use goes away. It just means that you will have a lot more ambulance calls and you will find a lot more people who cannot be revived if they are not seen. So what this is about, it's about, as we said, freedom of speech, freedom of press. Then we have the Canadian Association of Journalists speaks to that very clearly, and says ethical journalism does not give a favored treatment to those in power. It remains independent in service of the public interest, like it says, to those influences. So we ask the National Post and Post Media that they repost that opinion article by Guy Fellicella, that it's republished, and that they issue an apology and that they adhere to the journalistic guideline by the Canadian Association of Journalists. And we asking you listeners, anybody who's interested, to sign on to the letter. There is a link that I'm sure you will post with your show.
Absolutely.
There's a link that people can use, and through that link, they can sign on. And we leave it open until Tuesday. And on Wednesday, we'll send the letter off to Post Media. Also, those who sign pledge that they will not share Post Media stories on their platforms. Like some of us have fairly large followings on social media, and I will no longer share Post Media. I will still, for the time being, do interviews, because not doing interviews would mean giving Marshall Smith and the likes of him more of a platform, and I don't want to do that. And I also appreciate the hardworking journalists. One has to differentiate between the foreign ownership and the Post Media empire as a whole. But on the ground, like here in Edmonton and in Calgary, I've met some really, really amazing journalists that have uncovered important stories, broken important stories. The very first article about Danny was written by a young journalist called Otiena Allward in the Edmonton Journal. That's the very first time that the story was broken. So yeah, so this is not about the journalists on the ground and the work they do, which we really appreciate. This is about the organization as a whole. Yeah, and we will see how they respond. I don't have high hopes that they will respond, but who knows? If I'm also hoping that other media, like mainstream media, will pick that up, because it should concern anybody who works in media. when opinions like Guy Felicella's, who's a respectful man who knows what he's talking about, when Guy Felicella's opinion is suppressed, who is going to be next? It's just like the situation with the teachers who are ordered back to work. When something like that happens, where fundamental rights and freedoms of people in this province, in this country, are taken away to one group, who is going to be next? And we have to stand up. If we don't stand up in solidarity for each other, um, we will not be able to stop this sliding into US style politics and erosion of democracy.
You raised a couple points that I want to sort of highlight because when you talked about the public usage, there's an aspect of the public drug usage that many people don't appreciate, and I certainly didn't appreciate up until just a little while ago because I had a conversation with some drug users who were congregated in an area that they regularly congregate in,
Mm-hmm.
and they were using there in a group. And I asked a couple of them, like, why do you guys always come here? What is it about here? And the answers that I got were twofold. One of them was like, well, this is where all my friends are. But the other one was, we know there's lots of security cameras here, and we know that they're live monitored. So if any of us go down, we know that that will trigger an emergency response. And so your comment about forcing people off of the streets, it doesn't stop the drug use, is 100% bang on. And in a province where municipal governments and the provincial government are actively working to get rid of supervised consumption sites, that only amplifies the risk of tragedy. So I just wanted to throw that into the ether because I know when they told me like it's because of the security cameras we don't want to die, I was like, oh damn, this is complicated. But the
Yeah.
other thing that I really want to emphasize is you talk about this is not a attack on the reporters. This is not an attack on
Mm-hmm.
the ground level staff involved in these organizations. And certainly from the anonymous source that we had with the Herald, um, the staff did not want the article taken down. The people involved in the article allegedly, I probably have to say that. I just say it all the time now. The people who were involved in getting that article onto the ether, they didn't want that article taken down. The local editorial editors didn't want that article taken down. So this is coming from on high. And that is profoundly dangerous because when you have journalists or editors who are saying, no, this is important, we need to be talking about this, and somebody makes a decision not based on the public discourse, not based on the merits of what's being published, but rather on this guy sounds angry and he has friends, maybe. I don't know if that's what happened. Probably have to say that too. Um, if that's how the decisions are made, that is, we talk about regulatory capture in oil gas. That is regulatory capture of our media, and that's terrifying.
Yes, I agree. And that's why it is so important that lots of people know about it, um, that hopefully your audience will help us make go this story, help this story go bigger, sign on, support this letter. And we have to let the likes of Post Media know that we are not going to take their BS. Also, if there is still somebody out there who has a subscription, maybe they could consider canceling that subscription and letting them know why they're canceling, that they don't want to subscribe to a paper that doesn't allow freedom of speech and freedom of the press. We should not. Voting with our wallet is one way that Americans have noticed that we are not going there. But we are still consuming way too much of their digital media, and then bringing that kind of into the consciousness is important.
Yeah, no, I think it's fantastic, and absolutely, we'll be spamming that link through all of our socials
Good.
for the next 2 or 3 days at least, up until
Yeah.
Tuesday morning, I guess.
Yeah.
And I have no problem saying, I mean, obviously, there are some things just by nature of the work that the breakdown does, where local reporters in Alberta who work for Post Media or affiliated organizations. Um, are doing things that are really important to the conversation on Alberta politics, and we will still be sharing those individual stories. We don't have a subscription, and I have no problem saying I signed the letter because uh, it is the erosion of the quality of our local journalism is something that I haven't seen. Here's the thing: I haven't seen a single journalist say, hey, local journalism's doing great, no concerns here. I just haven't
Hmm.
seen that. And so this is a concrete, it appears to be a concrete example of, and this is how it happens. This is how local journalism gets a pillow held over its head for too long. And I think that it's so important that that people push back. So thank you so much for taking this on. Is there anything else you want people to hear? Is there anything else you want people to know?
I want people to know that things are there. There's a lot of intersection. We have so many issues thrown at us in this province, but where they all intersect is that we have a right to speak, that we have a right to healthcare, we have a right to education, we have a right to life, and we have to be in solidarity. The different movements, the labor movements, those of us fighting for harm reduction, people who are fighting for trans kids, these fights, they're all the same. They're against an oppressive government that will wants to take basic rights away. So go out and support each other. I was at a rally against age cuts, another issue that is important to me because a lot of people who use substances are also on age, and my oldest is on age. So I was at the age rally, and the kids were still there from the teacher rally, the high school students, and they said, "Hey, what's this about? We're going to stay." And they learned about it, and they were all excited, and they were boisterous, and we had yeah, a much bigger age rally than we would have had otherwise. So solidarity is what I'm calling for. Stand by each other, go out, support other people's causes. They will come and support yours.
100%. And I've said before on the show that that's probably one of the biggest weaknesses of progressives, is that we tend to go, this is my issue. And if you don't align perfectly with all of my views, I'm not going to support your issue. And the flip side of that is conservatives, if they find one thing, just one thing that they align
Mm.
on, they will act as force multipliers for each other until the cows come home. And the purity tests among progressives are probably one of the bigger hindrances in pushing back against all this stuff. So I love that you called that out. Anything else you want to throw into the mix there, Petra?
Otherwise, just yeah, thank you everybody in advance who will help share this and support it. And let's give people like Guy a voice. You know, he earned that voice. And anybody go out, listen, find his TED Talks. Really, he's a really powerful speaker, and he's a very kind and caring man, and doesn't slander anybody.
No. And I'll use this as an opportunity to plug an upcoming episode that we actually have with Guy that we recorded a couple months ago because and this just kind of speaks to the kind of person that Guy is. Um, he invited myself and my wife to go on a tour, a walkabout, I don't know what to call it, of
Walkabout, yeah.
yeah.
Hmm.
Tour is wrong. That sounds like voyeuristic in a way that I don't like.
Yeah. A
Um,
visit, a guided visit.
yes. Very I love that. I'm gonna use that when I write the
Okay.
but he invited us to go on a guided visit of the Lower East Side in East Hastings,
Mm.
and it was an incredibly powerful experience. Nobody gave us any grief, and the relationships that Guy has built with so many of the people down there are, there were people who are coming up being like, "Hey, man, I've been sober for this long thanks to you." And it's not because Guy shamed them. It's not because Guy stigmatized them. It's because Guy treats human beings like they're human beings. And that it should be a bare minimum. So I have nothing but good
Cool.
things to say
Look
about Mr.
forward to that
Fellicella.
episode. Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be probably just audio because obviously we didn't want to film people without their
Mhm.
permission. It turns into a whole thing. I learned that from the Street
Yeah.
Cats. And so it's going to be an audio episode, but I'm really, really excited for it. And I think it's really, really important because it does need to be a nuanced, multifaceted response, and trying to boil it down to talking points does harm. It does real harm.
Yeah.
So, Petra, thank you so much for taking the time to chat tonight. Really appreciate it. Nice to finally get to have the opportunity to chat with
Yeah.
you. And we're going to run this episode tonight right after. I'm told there's some sort of a sporting event later tonight.
There seems to be, yeah,
I
something happening.
like lawn bowling or something. I don't
Yes.
know.
Involving baseballs or something
Was
like
that what it
that.
was? Okay, perfect. I knew there were balls involved. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat.
Thank you.
And that's it for another episode of The Breakdown. As always, if you appreciate the kind of content that we're trying to produce here, we would love nothing more than if you thought about signing up to be one of our Patreon sponsors at www.patreon.com/thebreakdownab, where for just the price of a fancy cup of coffee a month, you can help us continue to produce this kind of content. Whether you're listening to the audio version of the podcast, in which case, maybe leave a review and a rating, or whether you're watching it on one of our streaming platforms, we want to say a big thank you to everybody who is part of the Breakdown's audience. And as always, take care of each other and keep the conversation going.